support base for commodities and urban search and rescue task forces at Fort Bragg, and they're proven to be good partners as always. FEMA, Coast Guard, Army, Marine, Navy, FAA, EPA, and other federal agencies are well integrated here at the state EOC, as are our volunteer partners. Our state medical and general shelters are underway, and they are operating, and they can shelter pets as necessary. So in closing, let me thank our media partners for keeping everybody aware of what's happening and providing that critical information to all the residents and visitors of North Carolina, and to remind everyone once again, please follow the instructions of your local officials. Thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Now the Commander of the North Carolina Highway Patrol, Colonel Glenn McNeil. Colonel.
Thank you, Governor. First, I'd like to begin by thanking our law enforcement partners and first responders and our excellent DOT partners for all the great work that they've done to ensure that we're prepared and we're ready for this storm. As I stand before you this morning, I am pleased to report that the North Carolina State Highway Patrol is prepared and we're ready to respond to any needs that our citizens may have. We've identified multiple quick response teams who are ready to deploy at a moment's notice to the affected areas. We're working with our state and local partners to ensure that public safety remains a top priority. Major roadways right now are flowing as expected, with no major incidents to report at this time. Troopers are providing around-the-clock coverage of all of our major thoroughfares so that there are no issues for anyone having to travel. But we don't encourage that at this time. We expect to see dangerous conditions at the roadways continue to receive heavy rains and high winds. As we've said in the past, deciding to drive through flooded roadways is a life or death decision. You may not get a second chance to make the right choice. Please heed the safety messages that have been given to you and turn around and do not drown. I'm also requesting during the storm and after the storm has passed, please avoid dialing 911 or star HP for roadway conditions. Please leave these lines of communication open for emergency situations only. For up-to-date information regarding roadway conditions, please visit drivenc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. And now the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, General Jim Trogna.
Thank you, Governor. Employees are ready across our state to respond to Hurricane Dorian. All of our equipment is ready. Our ferry vessels have been secured after completing its mission of evacuation of the Outer Banks yesterday, and we have ready to go, if needed, established emergency ferry route that we can open with any future or potential breach of NC-12. The Piedmont trains 79 and 80, will continue operation between Raleigh and Charlotte. Our ports, both Wilmington and Morehead City, will be closed today and tomorrow. And then we have 40 drone teams that have been dispersed across the coastal areas in support of response missions, and have received a special waiver from the National Park Service in coordination to allow us to fly drones on the Outer Banks. Within the last half hour, we did have a received report of a closure that was unscheduled, and that's of several sections of US 17 between Leland and Charlotte. And initial reports are that it's solely closed due to debris from high winds and possible tornadoes. And so we'll have that section reopened as soon as the weather conditions allow us to do so. Pending anyone's questions, that concludes my update.
We'll now take questions that you may have, and if I ask you to wait for the mic, please raise your hand.
Hi, so we've still heard from people who are not willing to evacuate, they want to stay. I mean, what do you really want to drive home with them, especially due to how difficult the course of this has been to track?
Well, you certainly put first responders at risk and your own life at risk when you decide to stay, particularly on a barrier island. If they have not evacuated at this point, I'd get to the safest place that I possibly could, communicate that to people who are inland to let them know where you are and stay as safe as possible where you are. We also potentially can have flash flooding, and there are inland communities that sometimes would need to be evacuated on very short notice, and we're asking people to make sure you're listening and tuned in to local officials. We know that these flash floods can occur in certain areas, and sometimes you see local officials going and knocking on doors and telling people that they need to leave. And we ask people to pay attention to that.
I think this is for Secretary Trogdon. Last year we saw pretty historic monumental flooding at roads and highways, obviously I-40 and 95. I mean, what is your expectation based on what weather people have told you and what your engineers have told you about the expectations of what we could see in terms of road closings? I think people who just moved to North Carolina last year would think that might be the norm during a hurricane. I wonder if you could just discuss that.
Fortunately, we don't anticipate today the same volume of water that we saw for Hurricane Florence and Michael. However, in specific locations, based on the increased projections of flash flooding that we've just gotten in the last, in the last update, there's possible locations that we could see significant flash flooding, impacts to roads, rapidly deteriorating conditions from, one part of the day to the next. So we're fully prepared to respond to that. Several of the things that we've done since Hurricane Florence to date was work closely with emergency management and the FIMAN system, and we're adding components. We added 40 more stream gauges to help us close some of the gaps that we had in prediction. So we're really trying to be able to predict much earlier when these conditions could occur, so we can help get that information out. So I don't think we'll see the significant broad impacts like we had all the way through the Piedmont up through Greensboro and Winston-Salem. However, localized, we can see the same kind of damage in more local areas.
Just to confirm, those new stream gauges were since Florence,